Welcome, welcome to the sacred art of gaming. Today we will be discussing the Sacred Chronicles. And why are we discussing these Sacred Chronicles? Well, it is important to know where we came from to know where we are going. In this episode of the Sacred Chronicles, we will be discussing why I resisted Dungeons & Dragons TTRPGs for so long. Let us discuss. It feels disingenuous to do the hand thing. Alright, so welcome to my cozy corner here. I am Sacred, this is the Sacred Art of Gaming, and this was just kind of thoughts that I had, and you know what, I felt like it was worth talking about. I think it would be worth exploring. I think we can get a little out of this that could be beneficial for you, hell, maybe even for me. So yeah, let's talk about it. And this is kind of like what I alluded to. This is almost like session 0 for me. We're going way back. We're going way back in time of Sacred, right? With that said, it honestly does, to say that I have a YouTube channel based on tabletop role-playing games is honestly somewhat insane, given where I started like 25 or more years ago. So, I mean, man, we could even say 30. Oh man, yeah, 30 plus. So, when Sacred was but a wee lad, he enjoyed the normal little boy things at that time, I would say. Power Rangers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, X-Men, Spider-Man. You know what we're talking about. We're talking like early 90s. Loved wrestling, loved telling stories with his toys. Power Rangers toys, Ninja Turtles toys, and you know, I just remember being in my room for like hours and just, you know, sometimes my sister would play too, and we would do these like crossovers with her Barbies, and the G.I. Joes would get involved, and it was, it was fun, but I definitely, you know, when she brought her toys, it kind of added a wrinkle that I didn't like. I definitely had a story that I wanted to tell that day. And then, you know, the next day or whatever, I would kind of continue that story. Another thing that I did that I think is worth noting, and I'm sure like a lot of kids do this, right? I repurposed stuff all the time. So I was constantly trying to find different ways to use the same things. We'll delve back to that later. As I get older, you know, I'm sure I liked playing outside then too, but as I'm like getting older, getting different friends, and we're playing outside, and we're playing like forts and stuff, and we're throwing like clay at each other, and we're invading each other. Again, continuing to tell these stories that were kind of like in my mind. I'm sure I maybe wrote them down or did pictures or whatever, but it meant more to me than just simply playing. And then, inevitably, I get to that point where I get a little girl crazy, and I also really enjoy sports. I'm realizing now, I think, that I love playing football because football is a game. I don't need to, like, be obsessed over watching football all day Sunday. Also worth noting during all of this time, I wasn't into the normal stuff that, like, I feel like a lot of people that love tabletop games, and maybe I'm putting you guys in a box, but a lot of my friends, they grew up liking things like Zelda and Final Fantasy, Lord of the Rings. I didn't like any of that. So to say I'm here now is kind of weird. I'd say the closest to any of that I really got to was Pokemon. I eventually did, I'd go to church and I had like Pokemon Red, I would assume. I think I eventually did get Silver and Gold, and then I kind of aged out of it at that point. Yeah, I actually completed it, which was kind of insane at that time. The only game that I really was completing was like the Ninja Turtle arcade game and like beat 'em ups like that. I actually completed both I think I had red and gold, and I think my sister had silver and blue, maybe. Or maybe she had gold and I had silver. Anyways, I completed those games, and you know, there's a little bit of RPG elements to that. Here's where things kind of take a turn. I'm getting to the tail end of my high school career here, and I don't know, I think it's just like a natural thing that just happens where you kind of just get a little bit more comfortable in your own skin. And I started to realize that, like, hey, maybe it's okay that I like Halo, Grand Theft Auto, what else was big at that time? Tony Hawk, No Mercy, that's a little bit older at that point. But I made a random discovery, and I honestly may never forget this, to be perfectly honest. I used to love going to GameStop with my dad, and I would like save up lunch money. Like, I think I'd get like $3 a day, and sometimes I would just not eat so that I could save the money faster. But in general, I'd have like less than $1, so like 50 cents or more extra, and that would build up over time. So then we would go to GameStop, and after, you know, weeks or months or whatever, you know, I'd get to the point of like maybe $20 or something, and maybe I could get a used game at GameStop. And I picked up this random game that was kind of outside the norm for me, because again, I'm not super into like fantasy or anything, but I picked up a game called Morrowind, The Elder Scrolls Morrowind. Maybe you've heard of it. And I looked at it, and the cover, I don't even know why the cover drew me in, because the cover isn't evocative necessarily if you don't necessarily know what it is. And I'm looking at it, and I turn it over, and I can see that, oh, you can create your own character. And I'm like, whoa, like I don't just choose, I get to pick from like different races, and then in addition to choosing different races, I can choose like what I want to do, if I want to use like a sword or a bow. And this blew my mind at the time. I couldn't believe what I was reading, and I was like, yes, this is it. This is the Game of the Year edition. I want this game. So I got that game, and I wasn't fully ready for that game. I of course made a lizard named Spike, an Argonian, and I just remember like leaving that town, Balmora I think it is, and the wizard like collapses into the road after doing the leap spell for like way too far, and he dies, and then you get it, and then of course you leap and then you die. And that just unlocked so much for me. I honestly, yeah, it was kind of insane. I didn't beat that game for a very, very, very long time. I really just played that game and did random stuff. The most random. It was so weird to say I played it the way that I did, which I'm sure is normal, but I didn't know that it was normal at the time to just like, oh, I'm gonna make potions and I'm gonna sell them, or I'm gonna be a part of the temple. I'm gonna go fight Umbra a million times. I'm gonna levitate myself and then just shoot arrows at her. So yeah, that was crazy to me. And eventually I took something that I did from my childhood, which was taking these overarching stories from these like made up characters that I was role playing as, whether I was playing with like action figures or playing outside, or eventually turned into video games where I would take the video games and be like, oh, you're in a mech, and now you're going from a mech to, all right, now you're in Grand Theft Auto and you gotta drive and do this thing. And it was really like insane, but as a child it was a lot of fun. So I would then start making characters in Morrowind and kind of role-playing before I like really fully grasped what that was. That inevitably led to like, why don't we explore some other stuff? So then I looked into, I didn't look into, it was bestowed upon me, games like Fable, Dragon Age, Jade Empire, and I think a game, now I'm kind of going into college, and a game was coming out by the name of Oblivion. And I think I've gotten more excited for that game than I will ever get for any game ever. I remember watching the videos and getting so excited, and it just blew my mind the way it looked, and I was just so excited to really I don't know, I was a little bit more mature at this point. I was ready. Also during this time, I had my own computer now, and I've got more time. I'm in like college. So I was also exploring games like Guild Wars, which, man, did I really go to the sunken place with that one. Really sucked me in. I made it out alive. Yeah, what an incredible game. Similar thing was happening there, but you know, an MMO is kind of its own thing. That's where I created my very first character in an MMO ever, known as Sacred Beast. And man, did he have quite the run. I made like an occupation. It was like a side hustle. I'm like running people from one part of the map to the other, and they would pay me money. It was crazy. So these characters I'm starting to make, sometimes I'll make the same characters in different games. Like maybe I'll take the character in Morrowind and then continue it into Oblivion, or make them in Dragon Age or some version of them. And the next thing you know, I'm starting to have these stories in my mind of these characters without really knowing that the technology for this type of thing already exists, which is tabletop role-playing. So as I get more established, I'm more comfortable, I do the inevitable. I start spending my money on things I don't need. And inevitably it turned into, and by this point I did eventually enjoy things like The Lord of the Rings. Maybe not the full appreciation that it deserves, but still. Remember there was like a PS1 or PS2 game for Lord of the Rings, and I think that's when I was like, man, it sucks when you have to play the hobbits, but this is actually a lot of fun. Picking up the spears and throwing them. And I remember liking Legolas. I was like, oh my god, it's amazing shooting the bow. And, you know, he didn't exactly fulfill what, you know, considering I was super into football and stuff at that time. I'm like, oh, you know, he's kind of feminine looking, but man, is he cool. So, anyways, back to my I needed to spend money on things. I discovered this hobby, or this, yeah, I guess you could, yeah, it's a hobby. HeroClix. I don't know if you've ever heard of HeroClix. If you can see those guys, this looks like Hawkeye and Black Widow, I want to say. We got Falcon over here. And kind of a neat concept where you click this thing on the bottom and it changes their health. And depending on what their health is, all of them have different health, but their abilities change based on their health. And it's more of like a strategic game. And then from there I inevitably went to games like Warhammer Quest, the adventure card game, Gloomhaven, Dragonfire, One Deck Dungeon, games like this. I think it's worth mentioning because I am literally on the precipice of the next logical step is very clear, and that step is Dungeons and Dragons and its fellow allies, if you can call them that. But I denied. I was like, no, Dungeons and Dragons is like made up. It's you don't have rules. I don't like the fact that there's no rules. You basically just do random things, and then a person that doesn't even get to play has to then watch and say, yeah, you can do that, or no, you can't do that. And I was like, no, that's not for me. And I was harassed about this for years because people knew that was, hey man, like, maybe this is a thing that you should try. I think you'll like it. They were right. That brings us to kind of where we are. And, you know, I took some of those characters from games and I started to play them in these games. But it all started with potentially maybe unlikely game. Got a little bit of glimmer there. Mutants and Masterminds. And if I didn't mention HeroClix, maybe that would not seem like it makes sense, but man, the idea of this game blew me away. And we'll get back into that in the next Sacred Chronicles, where we discuss once I start finally actually playing. This has been Sacred with the Sacred Art of Gaming. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're digging the content. Leave a comment down below. Let me know, like, how did your story unfold? Did you have a kind of strange trajectory such as myself? Or was it a little bit more straightforward? I feel like there's almost like a weird stigma, and maybe less so now because of, you know, it's a little bit more mainstream. But for a long time, like, you know, I would assume that if I was doing something like that, that I wasn't going to be, at the time I didn't think many females would be interested in that. And now here we are, modern day, and it's like, I don't know if I'd say it doesn't matter, but doesn't feel like the social death sentence that it once did. And I think it's important to note that by the time I jumped into that hobby, I guess it didn't really matter because I was already kind of like in a relationship. So yeah, very interesting. So the intent of these Sacred Chronicles, this one's going to be a little bit different because it's the very beginning, session 0, so to speak. But I want to take this in a direction of recalling some of my best and worst moments as both a GM and a player, and unpack them here and everything around them. Something a little less mechanical and a little bit more, let's unpack this situation and hopefully others can benefit from it. So there you have it. This has been the Sacred Chronicles. I don't know if I'm gonna keep that. This is the start of the Sacred Chronicles. This is Sacred with the Sacred Art of Gaming. Until next time.